So hello, everybody. We're really glad you can join us today. My name is Eileen Levinson. I am the founder and executive creative director for Haggadot.com and High Holidays at Home. We're also joined by Rebecca Missel, our director of partnerships. And we are really excited to have Esther Kustanowitz here, who is not only one of my favorite people in the world and my former roommate and actually a co-officiant at my wedding. But Esther is also a contributing writer at the Jewish Journal and also contributes to the Forward, to JTA, the Jewish Week, Hadassah Magazine, Haaretz, and Modern Loss, among others. And she is the co-host of her new podcast, The Bagel Report, about Jews and entertainment. She also speaks extensively about hashtag TV Gone Jewy, a term she invented to describe the increase of Jewish content on TV. I highly recommend checking out one of those talks as well if you can. And she's also written extensively about grief and loss. And so before I turn over to Esther, I just want to share a few words about what we're doing here at Haggadot.com and High Holidays at Home. So obviously it's not Passover season, but you may have heard of us through Haggadot.com, which is a website inviting every Jew, regardless of their background, to find a place for themselves in the Passover story, so they may create more meaningful, more personal, more connective Passover Seders. And we do that by crowdsourcing the Haggadah, so that anybody can upload and exchange content and use an interactive version, as you see here, which was very helpful during online Seders, or print it out. And so obviously, since we are in a very unusual high holiday season, we took our technology to expand it to highholidaysathome.com. So highholidaysathome.com allowed users to make their own Rosh Hashanah Seders, but there's still a lot more for Yom Kippur and for Tashlik, and you can mix and match readings and blessings and poetry and art and even videos and music to create your own home experience for the high holidays. And both of our websites, Haggadot.com and High Holidays at Home, are actually part of our larger nonprofit called Custom and Craft Jewish Rituals. And we're a design studio all year round for the Jewish community. And we experiment with technology, media, and video to imagine new formats for engaging in ancient traditions. And it's pretty core to our principles that we offer as much as possible for free. We want as much access to meaningful creative Judaism as possible, but we're only able to do that and webinars like this by asking for donations. So if you're finding our content meaningful and you're able to, we really hope that you're able to contribute to our work, and we'll share a link to that at the end of the webinar. And also you can always find a donate link on our websites. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Esther K., who is going to share some really important thoughts about how to remember loved ones and important inspirational figures that we've lost, and bring them into our high holiday and year-round Jewish traditions.
Thank you so much, Eileen and Rebecca and Haggadot, a marvelous, marvelous site that does great work for so many people, really expanding the accessibility of ritual and helping us all connect to Judaism more meaningfully. So I'm grateful for the space. I'm grateful, obviously, for the friendship. And I'm grateful for all of you who showed up today to talk about something that, you know, isn't necessarily always happy, happy, joy, joy, but it's like something that is important to our lives. And especially around this time of year, a lot of people start thinking about the people they've lost, and thinking about how the lessons they've learned, good and bad, shape the person that they've become. So I'm hoping that in today's session, you'll have a chance to review some of the things you probably already know about how Jews mourn, and also to have a chance to just think about some new iterations of rituals and statements that people make to each other when they're in a space of grief and loss. And hopefully it'll help infuse the next couple of days, you know, before Yom Kippur and even thereafter, with a sense of connection to other people who are going through loss, whether it's fresh or older or renewed, reawakened by the fact that we're all in isolation and dealing with whatever we're dealing with separately and apart from people that we love. So I want to just kind of introduce that as just an introductory statement. And I'm going to share my screen, and you'll get a chance to see inside my little slide share presentation. And we'll do some like learning, we'll do some chatting, we'll do some listening. It's going to be a multi-sensory affair this next hour. So I hope you're all ready. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen share. I'm going to present because that's what I'm here for, right? All right, so as you can see, I love this image, which I found somewhere on the internet. And it's the words of the Kaddish, which is classically known as the prayer that people say in memory of a loved one. And we'll get to Kaddish a little bit more in detail later. But I just thought that this was so interesting because of the idea of, just that words come together in various ways, and that if we understand them, then that's great. But if not, we may need to find other words or mix up the words so that they end up becoming something that is more relevant to us. So today, I just wanted to lay out some objectives. I would love for us all to be able to share stories with each other. And I think we have a small enough group that that's actually possible. I would love for us to be inspired by Jewish ritual and, of course, these calendar moments that we're in now and that are approaching in the future. And also just to figure out, like, we all know people in our lives who mean a lot to us and who are no longer here. And we probably don't need much prompting to remember them on a regular basis. But to think about those people through the lens of how they emotionally, spiritually, or religiously impacted us and our lives is something that I hope we can pay some specific focus to. So I hope you all have your pens, pencils, styli, any kind of writing implement, a piece of bark and a sharp knife. I don't know. If you're a whittler, you have your whittling materials handy, because we're going to get started. And although I know Yom Kippur is the next thing on the calendar agenda, I did want to introduce the concept of Ushpizin, which some of you may already know is a tradition that when we are sitting in our sukkah, our hut in the holiday of Sukkot, we're supposed to invite in Jewish historical figures as guests. And traditionally, of course, this meant men, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David. But more recently, people have been including Jewish historical women, which is great. We have Sarah, Rachel, Rebecca, Leah, Miriam, Abigail, and Esther, some of whom are on this call. And in addition to those biblical figures, like a lot of people have taken to doing this thing, like almost like a party game where they go around the circle of the guests that they've invited. Obviously this year, there are going to be fewer guests, so it's important to have really great answers to this question. But to say, like, who would you like to invite into the sukkah? Whose spirit, humor, inspiration would you love to invite in? And quite honestly, even before she passed away, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was somebody that people mentioned that they would like to have at their sukkah table. I can't imagine that this year, everybody isn't going to want RBG to invite the spirit of RBG into the sukkah. But what I'd like to hear from you now is, like, if you have a sukkah, or if you are just emotionally preparing your mind to be in a sukkah, I want to know who is most on your mind, and who would you like to bring into the sukkah with you, and also to know what your name is, which I can see from the little name tag at the bottom, but also your location, and if you'd like to name the person who's most on your mind now, whether it's somebody personal in your life who you've lost, or somebody who is a public figure that you look up to, and you just wish that you could channel their energy. I would love to see that in the chat as well. can't find the chat. I had it on my phone, so I was going to.
I can.
Oh, I got it. I got it.
Okay,
It's back.
okay.
It's back. I got
Okay.
it. Thank you so much. All right. So Rebecca Grossman from Seattle, best friend from college, Nicole. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Emily in Indiana has her mother-in-law, Elizabeth, who died a week ago today. Very fresh loss. Emily, thank you for joining us. And we will remember your mother-in-law today together. Debbie says, Joan Frank, my mother, and she's in San Francisco Bay Area. Sarah Allen, New York. Dad, Rabbi Daniel Allen, and teacher of hers, Hirsch Jacobson. Erin in Charlotte, North Carolina says RBG, and my grandmas, Anna and Sheila. Ariella is in Washington, says her father-in-law, brother-in-law, and Aunt Millie, all who passed within this last year, and my grandmother. Thinking of all of you, and you know, that's a lot of people in 1 year. That's really hard, Ariella. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Tamara in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Wow. Invite Gertrude, my grandmother that I never met because she died before I was alive. Jay Fliss, my mom, who I just lost. Thank you, Jay, for being here with us. We're sending hugs. Carol Howard, suburban St. Louis, ancestors, everybody's on the list. Awesome. Talia in New Jersey, various friends and family. You don't have to be specific. You can just think of them, and we will think of you thinking of them. And Jay's from Palm Beach. Okay, thank you guys for participating in that. Oh, and Rachel in Los Angeles, honoring grandmothers, Rena and Jean. And Susie is in DC, remembering her mom. Okay, I think I got everybody. Thank you so much for participating in that. I think it's just really important to have all these people in mind and to have each other in mind, because although we are carrying these specific memories with us, having a call like this or a gathering of any sort, virtual or in real life, of people who have experienced loss and are experiencing loss, shows us is that we're not alone, and that we are actually connected to other people. And even though our individual experiences may differ, that there are other people in pain who are experiencing things like we're experiencing, and they are at different stages of their journey, and that we can all hold each other as we move forward and choose life. Similarly, I wanted to talk about the Kaddish just a little bit. As you can see, there's some lovely art from Jessica Tamar Deutsch, whose work is featured as almost like an artist in residence at highholidaysathome.com. So you can all check out her beautiful drawings and illustrations. But I wanted to just reiterate what many of you probably have already heard before, which is that Kaddish isn't about death, it's about the living. And if you look at the words, and the English is here with my summary brackets in following each line, just to kind of like really shorten it to the essence of the ideas. You know, so I think that, you know, the idea that that Kaddish is an affirmation of God's place in the world, because as mourners, the first thing we want to do is curse God for you know, taking away somebody who we wanted to be around a lot longer. So if that instinct is there, having this kind of framework for praise that doesn't actually mention death and focuses on the here and now, that we are praying for peace and for love and for life, and just establishing that, you know, God did a great job at creating the world. We can't wait for God to be king. Some of us can, you know, wait. I could wait a little bit, but and also, you know, I tried to in my translation to not necessarily use the king language or the male language, but you know, it's hard. Translation is hard, especially gender sensitive translation is hard. Anyway, but God is simply the best, better than all the rest, better than anyone, and that we should give peace and life a chance. And then at the end, we have Oseh Shalom, B'Rumav, you know, ask for the person or the entity that creates peace up in the celestial heights, let's all have peace for us and all of Israel, and we say Amen. All of those things are not about death. And also just in terms of, that's in terms of the content of the ritual, but in terms of the act of saying the ritual, that it's supposed to be in a community of 10 people with a minyan. The idea that in a time when you might feel like you want to cut yourself off from community, this is an opportunity and in fact a commandment to re-enter the community and to be part of it, even if you're kind of being dragged there by your obligation. It's important, it's an important on-ramp back to community, even though you might feel like you want to disconnect from them and from everybody. And I wanted to share this Oseh Shalom, which is, we'll just watch a little bit of it. It's an original song called Oseh Shalom, Kaddish, Hello, by Neely Eisenberg, who lives here in Los Angeles. She's a friend of mine. She was actually in an a cappella group with my brother in college. And she lost her dad a couple of years ago, suddenly and unexpectedly. And then after the year of Kaddish, she wrote this Oseh Shalom that also has elements of the Adele song, Hello. I'll play enough of it so that you get an idea what it is, and you can look it up online to hear the rest of it. But I definitely thought it was worth sharing.
Oseh Shalom במרומיו יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל עושה שלום במרומיו יעשה שלום עלינו ויאמרו אמן Shalom. Can you hear us? Pray for peace upon our father, mother, sister, brother, child, who are gone now and free. May their souls ascend to heaven and bless our family, HaMakom. Yenachem etchem betוך שעריו לציון. I've said these words 1,000 times. Ve'allah tivrach cherutei ve'yamlich malchutei ve'itzmach burkanei ve'karev meshichei. Hello from the other side. At least I can say that I've tried. Ki ata hu Adon lechol hashalom amvarech et amo Yisrael l'shalom. Amen.
Okay, there's more obviously, but I want to preserve some time for us to really get into some of this other stuff. But I thought that was really remarkable because she just took, I mean, she's got a beautiful voice, obviously also, and she's an educator and singer and mom, and you know, that she found time to be inspired by the work of Adele and listen to those lyrics and say, you know what, that's actually very similar to Kaddish, and I bet they'd work well together. And I love that kind of mashup of popular culture, contemporary meaning, and Jewish tradition. And so that's one of the things that, they didn't ask me to do this plug, but that's one of the things that Haggadot.com and High Holidays at Home always do, is that they allow this space for exploration around ritual and making things contemporarily relevant. So I thought that was a really wonderful idea. Anyway, okay, so Judaism marks immediate loss in a lot of different ways. You know, we've got like the moments of death and loss. There's Shmira, which is staying with the body until it's ready for burial. There's the Chevra Kadisha that prepares the body for burial. There's the funeral, the eulogy, the burial. There's ripping of the clothing, which I didn't include on here. There's covering of mirrors in a Shiva house. There's periods in which the the mourners are separated or distinguished as not being fully part of the community because they're in a space of mourning. And there's various time markers along the way: Shiva, 7 days, Shloshim, 30 days, and 11 months of going to a minyan to say Kaddish, the first yahrzeit. And we all say things to mourners, some of them more helpful than others, depending on who the mourners are and who we are. Some of the more helpful ones are here about may their memory be a blessing or for a blessing. I had a whole conversation with Rachel about that the other day, about what the actual, whether if there's a difference between may their memory be or be for a blessing. Then may God comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, where God is referred to as HaMakom, which we will talk about in a few minutes. And then finding comfort in community is a more neutral one, not necessarily with God language. And may their Neshama have an Aliyah, which is like, again, something we'll talk about in a bit, which is about how the soul ascend to heaven. And Anglo Jewry has, when I lost my mother, and it's so funny, I didn't actually even tell you that when I was talking about Ushpizin and the people that we're bringing, one of the main influences and inspirers of my work with writing about death and loss is my late mother, Shulamit Kustanowitz, who died in 2011. And so ever since then, I've been writing in this space. So I forgot to invoke her as an Ushpiza or Ushpiz. I don't know what the Aramaic is, very hard to regender for me. Maybe you can relate to that. That's really a very relatable sentiment. Anyway, so the idea of having a Neshama have an Aliyah, and when my mother died, my friends who were in England said, "I wish you long life," which is this whole Anglo Jewry thing, which kind of even Anglo Jews sometimes admit seems a little weird, as when to wish somebody who has just lost a loved one long life. But that is a local tradition. Just thought you might want to know about it. So the idea of may her Neshama have an Aliyah is really interesting because it's about the uplifting of the soul. So the question is, what happens to the soul after the person dies? And if the question of when somebody is wishing you, may her Neshama have an Aliyah, may her soul ascend, you think to yourself, are you saying that if you don't say that her soul isn't going to go up? That's ridiculous. I'm not going to believe that. So the question is, it doesn't mean that the soul isn't already in the good place, but that according to some traditions, there's an annual opportunity on the yahrzeit for reconsidering the case and essentially allowing that person's spirit to be uplifted further. So not uplifted from the bad place to the good place, but in the good place, even higher, even a higher level. And the idea is also that in the years following the person's passing, that the people who are left behind do good works in their name, because that person who is deceased cannot do mitzvot anymore on this earth. So we do them in their name. But I like to see it as kind of not as necessarily a direct link to the things that I do in this world are elevating her in the next. But the idea that we are in Aliyat Neshama, the uplifting of a soul, we can talk about lifting something up, like lifting a name up, like we did with the Ushpizin, saying things in memory of the people we've lost. Sometimes I talk about bon moms instead of bon mos, which is like little phrases that people say, that our moms, wherever they are, always had some interesting wisdom for us, even if we don't always agree with what they were saying. And so the idea of lifting up words in the name of the people we've lost is an elevation. And similarly, if we elevate the stature of something that they breathed into this world, if it was kindness, if it was a tremendous apple cake recipe, if it was, a challah recipe that your mother gave to you and then said, never make this because you'll end up making it every week of your life and you'll ruin your life, which is literally what my mother said to me. then, just anytime you lift any of those memories up, you're giving the Neshama an Aliyah. And one of the things that we say to mourners is HaMakom Yinachem Etchem, is may God, again referred to as HaMakom, bring you consolation among the mourners of Zion and Israel, which both acknowledges the individual space that a mourner is and also contextualizes them in a larger sense as part of a mourning populace. And so in many texts, HaMakom is God. There is a point in the Haggadah, since we're co-sponsored by Haggadah.com, there's a point in the Haggadah where we talk about Baruch HaMakom, Baruch Hu Shenatan Torah. So like we talk about God is blessed, HaMakom is blessed, who gave us Torah, right? So in consoling a mourner, when we say HaMakom Yinachem, we're saying God, but we're also saying that we hope this place, this space, this time will provide comfort. And so, there's a lot of questions about like, what does it mean to have a place that consoles you? And especially now, as we are also separated, the challenge is, because before COVID, people used to go to some place central, Shiva house or a memorial service or a funeral and console the mourners and then leave. But now we're all separated. And so what we've got to do now is kind of emotionally get to that place, to that makom, and ritual creation is a very big part of that, because whether it's we always go to the same street corner every Friday and just kind of think about a lost loved one, or we make challah in somebody's memory, or we have things that we look at from time to time on an altar. All of these things are creating the actual physical place and also creating the spiritual connection to makom, inviting in some sort of divine or continuity or ancestry. So how do we remember after the first year? This is a big challenge, as some of you have been through this for more than a year know, is that people are pretty good about like acknowledging loss in the first year. But then after that, there's just kind of a feeling that you should get over it already, or that they don't want to be around people who are talking about death all the time. And while I get some of that, to expect grief and loss to go away after a year is an artificial construct that's not realistic. Everybody processes loss on a different kind of level. And how we go about remembering the people we've lost and paying tribute to their memories differs from person to person. So we've got, Yizkor is several times a year. It's a service that's said on some of the Jewish holidays and festivals. That's very intense and emotional, especially for people who are going through this for the first time. There have been, like in the past, when I went through Yizkor for the first time, I was standing with a group of people who had also lost a parent, and we all had our arms around each other and supported each other during this time. And that was really important. And my heart really goes out to those of you who are experiencing loss this year under these incredibly unusual and challenging circumstances. And if you are going to a Yizkor service, either socially distanced outside or via web stream this year, if you feel alone, I just want you to remember this space with all of us, and think of all of us, and especially you can think of me with you, and kind of being that emotional support. It's not the same as in person, but it is something that we can put our intentions toward. Also, the idea of telling stories about our loved ones is something that we can continue to do. And it's a way to introduce that loved one into conversations, and also to remind other people that you're still thinking about this person, that it's still painful for you, and that maybe they should extend their ginger treatment of you a little bit further into that after that first year. What I wanted to show you here is, first of all, my excellent cartoon hero, women heroes mask, which is so small you can't even see it. But and my Lucasfilm hat, which I'm very proud of. Not because I worked at Lucasfilm, because I went to the gift shop. But I also wanted to show you, this is what IKAR, my spiritual community here in LA, has done this year to remember the people who have been lost from the loved ones in the community. What you can see in these pictures, and there will be more online, I'm actually just finishing up an article for the Jewish Journal about this, and there'll be many more pictures and explanations of how this whole thing happened. But IKAR generally does a Yizkor book where all of these, usually not photos, but they're written reflections by people in the congregation who are remembering people. They give a small donation in their memory of the person that they've lost. And there's this book that's passed out, and everybody gets it as a keepsake, and as kind of an opportunity to meet the people who made the people that you sit with. So that's been a tremendous project that I participated in almost every year. And last year I was also the editor for, which was its own kind of emotional challenge. But this year, because they know that we are not going to be in the same place, they wanted to have a physical space where we could go to remember. And so they created, you can see one of the boards here. I think that there are 8 of them, with written reflections of loved ones and photos. And so I took a little selfie with my mom and the piece that I wrote about her here. So that's her in the yellow. And so the idea to like have a space that you could go to remember somebody is actually very meaningful for me, because I'm far away from my family. So I can't go to them. I can't go to her grave, and visit, as my father says. But I also hear her saying, why should you spend your time visiting me? Go out and be with other people. So I don't know how to parse any of this. It's all just, the messages come through when they come through. But I love that they created their own ritual around this, and it's a garden that everybody can come into, up only 8 people at a time to adhere to COVID rules. There's sanitizing stations at the entrance and exit. There's also like some of the rocks that are from the mountainsides that have been burning here in California, to remember the loss of property and safety and security that a lot of people are feeling here. So there's both the personal and the global kind of loss. And there's also one of the panels is devoted to Ruth Bader Ginsburg now too. So I think that, the idea of the personal loss, communal loss, global loss, environmental loss, and that people can come here and be in a peaceful space and think and read and listen and remember. I think it's very powerful. Also powerful is this little altar that I wanted to share with you. So here's the thing, is that my nephew, I love my nephews and nieces more than anything in the world, as some of you who know me know that. And when my mother died, it was May. So this must have been October, because it was like Sukkot time. And my whole family was gathered at my parents' house for the first time since she died. And then my nephew Gil, who was 6 at the time, dragged us into the living room where he had put up these 2 tables and created this little memory altar in memory of my mom. Now, like, all of these things are like things that meant something to him. And that conjured for him his memories of my mother, which was just so beautiful. It looks like a random collection of things if you don't know what any of them are. And I don't even know what all of them are, quite honestly, but what the totality of them means is that he saw these things around his environment that reminded him of my mother, and he wanted to pluck them out and collect them together in her memory. And he didn't know he was making an altar or a display area or a museum or anything. He was 6. But one of the things that I thought was really cute is you see the 2 Uno cards here. It's a 6 and a 6, and it's because she was 66 when she died. And I didn't really realize that he knew that. But you know, I guess a 6-year-old is also, he relates to sixes. So he decided to put that there. And there's some things that my mother wrote during her lifetime, and some flowers and a little dog that she used to rest her wrist on when she got tired. So, so these are, I mean, this is remarkable to me, and I'm so glad that I have a picture of it, but I really only have a picture of it. I wish I had taken a picture of it actually. But I love the idea of making an altar. And so I wanted to ask you all to think about this concept of an altar. And obviously, you know, we can't necessarily go to all your homes and see your altars if you've created one, or even if after this you've created one. But I would like you to just imagine that you've just run around the room gathering objects that remind you of your loved one and arrange them on a table. You can imagine that you're 6 years old if you want, but the most important thing is not to get stuck in the editorializing of like, oh, that's not a good enough object. That's whatever you're choosing is the right thing. And I would love for you to choose to share one or more of the items that are on this table that you're imagining or that you're actually going to be creating later. And you don't have to tell us why you're choosing it. Just an object that reminds you of a loved one, and put it in the chat. And we'll read through each other's items and see what resonates. Why don't you give it a try? Maybe see some people in the chat soon, and then we'll move forward to the next thing. An antique school bell from Debbie. Thank you. Picture jewelry, toe shoes from Rebecca. Dog's favorite toy from Jay. Pictures of Grandma Sheila and her jewelry from Erin. Jewelry is a big thing. Pictures and diamonds that then you import into your new ring, which is beautiful. Home dried fruit, cloth mandala, accordion music. All of these things are wonderful, you know, foods, music, objects, photographs, jewelry, dad's watch and mother's fountain pen, cat figurines, recipes and jewelry, a honey jar. Beautiful. Thank you all. Thank you so much. I actually wanted to share a couple of things. Of course, I knew this question was coming, so I prepared in advance. You didn't have to prepare in advance, but I wanted to show you, getting caught in my headphones. So I wanted to show you this. This was something that my mom used to leave notes in my packages when she sent them to me in camp or when I was in college or whatever. And apparently I'm a hoarder. And I kept this note from her where she just wrote love, 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 and then wrote lots of love at the bottom. And so that's just one of the things that I have in a frame just to remind me that there is lots of love. Just going back to the chat for a second. We've got some more people saying surviving candlesticks brought from Europe, amazing. Flowers in the vase and the Hanukkah dreidels, great. And you're gonna get another opportunity to explore that around Hanukkah time. Tamara just realized that she's got some earrings with some stones from her grandmother. That's beautiful. Some real encouragement for my hoarding. Thank you so much. Talking watch and a cell phone and a hat. And a keeper. Yes, Barbara, that's a much better articulation of it. So thank you all for participating in that. I really enjoy hearing from you. I wish I could see you because I'm in presenter mode, and so I can't see you, but I can see your chats here. So that's great. Thank you so much. All right, so we're gonna get into the more creative version. See, that was all warm up, brainstorming. See how clever I was. So we're gonna start creating now, and I would like you to think about some things. And you don't have to think about all of these things, but these are some kinds of things to get you in the mood for creation. So you can think about one detail, a ring, a piece of dried fruit, a figurine. You can think about holiday memory, being like, oh my God, every Passover, my mother used to, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's about honesty, especially with art and in reflections of loved ones. We we tend to be hesitant to kind of show the gray areas or the more challenging moments. I know that not all stories are happily ever afters, but tension and conflict are also things that are real and that we sometimes need to admit to ourselves and sometimes to others. But we can also be selective about who we share those things with. Humor is something that some people think doesn't go with grief. I happen to think it goes excellently with grief and is so important. But the challenge is, of course, humor is not necessarily that we treat loss lightly. It's that we have a need to laugh. And so we can find the moments in our lives that were particularly absurd or strange and just laugh at those. And I think Rebecca Missel said she had like a story about remembering somebody in an irreverent way. So you want to tell us about that?
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. So my grandfather passed away in the early 90s as what I now realize was a relatively young man. He had survived the Holocaust, came to America, and discovered a love for golf. And unfortunately was out playing golf one day and was hit in the head with a ball that it killed him. And so my family sort of being irreverent, and I think honestly, both being Jewish and being from the family and descendants of Holocaust survivors, gives you a bit of gallows humor as a sort of default mode. And so my mom and uncles, as a way of sort of coping with this incredibly sudden loss of their otherwise healthy 67-year-old father, created the Thomas Stephen Jory Memorial Mini Golf Tournament. We had t-shirts one year with those initials on them and everything. And we would get together, the cousins and the aunts and uncles, and we would play mini golf in his memory over the summers, which was his birthday time of year.
Amazing. That's exactly what I mean. And it works in Rebecca's family. It may not work in every family. And, it certainly may not work for somebody to say, hey, this happened to you, you should do this. Humor is so subjective, and especially when you're talking about grief. But it is one of the inspirations that guides us creatively, as does whatever your particular library of texts are. So like that could be, family lore, it could be political activism or pop culture connection, or it also could be religion and religious moments. So I just wanted to encourage you to think about those things throughout when you're creating. And now we're actually going into a 3-minute exercise. So I'm going to time you on my watch. And I'm asking you to think about these questions, but you don't have to answer all of them or any of them. These are just guidelines to think about the kinds of relationship that you have with the person that you loved and who is no longer here. So what kinds of space, HaMakom, whether that either spiritual or physical, do you associate with your loved one? What objects remind you of them? Think about the altar exercise and you're running around the room and picking things up and putting them on an altar. What words of wisdom would they offer you for 2020? That's a big one. That's something I thought about for the IKAR exhibit. And I came up with something that, was kind of a little disturbing for me to explore, but there was also comfort in that. So I'm hoping that maybe that is a framework that works for some of you about just thinking about what your loved ones would say in 2020. And when you think about this season, whether it's, the falling leaves in some place that isn't Los Angeles, or the fires in Los Angeles, whatever this season means to you, if it's Jewish, calendar, meteorological, whatever, what connections to that person resonate with you? And if you're an action-oriented person, whether it's a golf tournament or a major, a walk for pancreatic cancer awareness, or like just remembering them every day, what actions do you take in their memory? And I wanted to just encourage you to write, to draw, sketch, doodle, create. Like I said, whittle if you'd like. If you have bark and whittling implements. But we're going to go for 3 minutes, and then at the end we'll come back together, and maybe do some sharing if you want, and then we'll move forward. One minute left. That's it, everybody. Thank you for doing our 3-minute exercise. I know 3 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, or alternately seems like forever, depending on how well you're doing with a creative exercise. But before we get to sharing some of the things that came up from there, another couple of people had talked about like the kinds of things that they do in the person's memory, and the little the altar situation. So SS Levy, I don't know the first name, sorry. It says has a dad's watch and last Father's Day card on a table. That must be really emotionally poignant. And a yearly mahjong tournament in memory of a sister, and raising funds for ovarian cancer research and awareness, cardinals, apple picking, cider, donuts. It seems like fall is a very rich time for your family. And Susan says her dad inspired her to be an activist. Oh, Shula, thank you, Shula. Sorry about that. My mother's name was Shuli, so I'm feeling connected right now. All right, thank you for doing that. I don't know if that was comfortable for you or if it was uncomfortable muscle that you're just stretching for the first time, but I hope you found it interesting, at least for yourself. And I would also love to hear from people who want to share how that was for them, share what your answers are, to share any of the things that you did during that exercise. You can tell us, like, did you whittle? I don't know. Did you did you write something? Did you write a poem? Did you write just freestyle? Did you sketch something? What came up for you? Okay, I feel like maybe people need to think about that a little bit because I'm not getting any comments from the chat, but maybe we can do that after and like just have people use their actual voices as we move toward the end of the presentation. We can come back to that, in terms of like how you're making meaning, either as a result of this webinar or how you are planning to make meaning. I see Sarah Allen says her dad always had a poem he shared on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and that they share it together. So she was looking for it. Sorry, I didn't mean to rush you, Sarah. Emily said she wrote haiku after Elizabeth died, and that was healing for her in some way. That's marvelous. It's when writing can be, writing and creating can be something that's so painful because it unearths some of this stuff, but it can also be incredibly healing. I know there are a number of writers and artists on the call, and so I know that you know where I'm coming from. But I wanted to move forward into something a little bit more whimsical that I thought was cute, that I wanted to show all of you, because this is one of my favorite stories of the year that came out of COVID. A woman named Naama Haviv, who works for Mazon, which is the Jewish response to hunger, she decided that what she really wanted to do was create a little museum in front of her house. And so she bought a display case and she started like having these exhibits, like featuring things that she bought before the COVID-19 quarantine hit, or talking about white fragility in the light of the Black Lives Matter movement's response to the George Floyd killing. And now she's got something there called New Year, New You, that's about Rosh Hashanah, but it's also about other cultural New Years around the calendar. And in this gift shop, she had adoptable Dwaynes because they were rocks, and she said that all the best rocks are Dwaynes, which is a nod to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who is one of her favorite actors. And so she had these little guys that look so sad here, but also like maybe they are like the official like mascots of 2020 kind of. And then what happened was a whole bunch of them were stolen by somebody in the neighborhood, because it's not a real museum, it's just a display case outside her house. And so somebody walked off with the gift shop, which was like a box of Dwaynes. And so she was upset about it. And then she created this in loving memory poster of the lost Dwaynes. And, kind of like did the whole Jewy thing, even though, it's not a Jewish museum. And, that was just how she mourned, as she did her own little altar to the memory of the Dwaynes. But since the Dwaynes went missing, there have been new Dwaynes that have been born. And in addition, people have started leaving other googly-eyed characters around. They've left Silversteins, which are shells. They've left crystals, which are Billies, bees, which are Arthurs, pots, which are Annies. And that's all because there are celebrities with all those names: Shel Silverstein, Billy Crystal, B. Arthur, and Annie Potts. And every time something new shows up, usually it's anonymous, like people are just responding to it in the community. And I really encourage you all to go to Instagram.com/thetiny@706, which is their museum. And it's been something that Naama did just for her own like sanity. And it really just resonated with the community because people needed a place to go, to look at things, to be stimulated, to share their ideas and creativity. And it's really been a real spark of joy, even after the Dwaynes, the Dwaynes went off to wherever they went off to with the person who took them. And so the idea of like incorporating ritual and providing access to ritual for other people, I thought this was a remarkable example of that, and one of the best stories to come out of the COVID time. And just in kind of summary, I'm just looking at the comments for a second. Rebecca was listening to music that she enjoyed. Tamara is saying, looking at old photos and all of that, all that good stuff. So thank you all for participating in the chat. And I just want to end with this one prayer that was always something that my mother really enjoyed. And so I've kind of adopted it in her name and talk about it quite a lot, which is that in the evening Shema, Shema being one of the central blessings and praise statements of Jews, in the evening prayer, there is the Ma'ariv Aravim blessing, which identifies God as the entity that rolls light away from darkness and darkness from light. And so basically that means that the cycle of nature's daily transformations, the person, the entity behind that is the divine. And so this identifies the fact that when there is light, you know darkness is coming. When there is darkness, you know light is coming. And so while it's a statement about nothing being eternal, that the idea of you can feel pain and darkness, and then that makes you appreciate the light. And so there's even like a reading of this, so you could say that in darkness is where the freedom is, and because nobody's looking at you, and you can do whatever you want. And then in light, you have to confront the choices that you've made. But in any case, however you define light and darkness, the idea that they're inextricably connected and always cycling was actually a source of great strength for her. So I wanted to share that with you in case it is of strength to you in these days ahead, or in your creative work around ritual. Okay. So I just wanted to thank you for being here today. This is my end slide. So that means my presentation is officially over. And that means I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to seeing your lovely faces, and would love to hear any comments from you, or experiences that you had during this webinar, or how you're going to be remembering somebody during this year, during this season. Hi, everybody. Hi, faces. I've missed you.
Thank you so much, Esther. I also want to share that we have a Pinterest board for that Haggadot.com has created with other visual ideas for doing, zhuzhing up your yard site candles, or other artists responding to memory. So I'm going to add that here. And as promised, I'm also adding the link to our donate page. If you're able to, your support helps us bring back more great speakers like Esther. And we're going to leave the room open for a couple more minutes for any questions, but we're just so grateful that you could be here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a privilege to explore this territory with people, and to sit in community when we're not able to actually be in community. Thank you.